Giles, you scooped Moscow again. Let's get our guest in here nice and early. Rob Cave. How's it
How you
going?
doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So I've asked you before, how are things down in Orange County?
Nice and sunny. I wasn't beaten up or stung by a bee. I've been getting a lot of vitamin D, a lot of sun.
You have been. Yeah, it's a good place to do it. You know, sometimes us up here in the LA basin, we take it a little for granted how much space you guys have down there in the South Bay in Orange County. Just, nice open expanses and can go get the vitamin D and it feeds the hair. It's obviously looks great tonight. The skin, everything leads to a healthy lifestyle.
Well, I think the big thing, because a lot of my friends are in house arrest in New York and even in LA, and they're in expensive homes. And
Yeah.
they're like, what do I even get from my money? Right? Like you're in some, I got this place, I got this like hip little spot in this neighborhood or whatever. And like you can't leave. You're in a shoebox and you're paying, whatever, $5,000 a month mortgage or whatever people are even paying in LA. So I think a lot of people are going to be more conscious about how they live in the future.
Without a doubt, I think there's going to be some residential and migration patterns that are really going to change, and those are the types of structural, as we get to talking about the way forward for society, something that both you and I definitely have our thoughts on. I mean, I think that's going to be critical to it. And, obviously how, for instance, work from home and teleconferencing and some of these new habits that have really been accelerated during this period are going to influence things. So just right off the bat, I wanted to thank you for I've been, looking forward to speaking with you in mass for a while now. Just to give a little background on how I encountered Mike Cernovich. So, I was always pretty politically active and interested. I kind of got disillusioned with things towards the later Obama years. It just seemed like things got boring, things got stale. There wasn't much to really monitor. And then Trump comes along, and it was just a little too strange for me. I couldn't really get into it. I spent most of the election season 2015 and 2016 keeping an arm's length, not looking, and I just expected the Trump thing to flame out. And I encountered whatever politically was happening through my social media feed, which was mostly corporate media, because that's what people like me did back then. Election night 2016. Me and a lot of other people get a real knock upside the head. I won't get too deep into it right now, but it's what I would equate. I've never had a concussion, but I think it felt like it is what I think a concussion would be like. I didn't sleep for probably 2-3 nights. Election night happens. I'm like, I watched Trump's victory celebration, and I'm like, what happened here? Did I see something wrong? Was I misled? And then I just stayed up. 36 hours straight. I went back through Trump rallies. I went back through conferences. I went back through media. One piece of media that I saw was an interview from Dave Rubin with you. Dave Rubin, an interesting case, as we'll get to, is talking about independent media in a second, because he's someone who Dave was was part of the Young Turks, which was more of a independent media organization, but he then branched off on his own and attacked some of the issues that I was starting to gravitate towards, like free speech, very early on. He had you on, and you had a very interesting perspective. Started following you, and clearly you had built up some sort of following and kind of carved out a niche as an independent journalist of sorts. And we're gonna go through all the various aspects of that and what you do now, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got started in that vein, which all kind of traces back to you being on a trip. Correct me if I'm wrong, being on a trip in Hungary and kind of doing some guerrilla citizen journalism regarding some migrant issues there.
Yes, I'd had a pretty good life, the idyllic life. I had a few blogs, did some affiliate marketing, online kind of stuff, and I was living in worldwide. So I always want to travel, and I was with Sean at the time, and well, I'm still with her, but we were together, and I was like, hey, dude, you want to just quit your job and go to like Vietnam with me and live in Vietnam? So we started off in Vietnam, and we did kind of the worldwide tour thing, and so we did Vietnam, Thailand. And I go, well, let's set up in Paris for a little bit. So we set up in Paris. And then while I was in Europe, I just would meet all kinds of people like, oh, I read your website, how you doing? The recognize the public kind of thing. And then I would do these meetups at happy hours, and some guy was like, oh yeah, there's this stuff going on in Hungary, and like what's being reported on is a lie. I was like, well, I don't, what are you talking about? And they said, well, if you watch the news, then you're told basically that people who are refugees are just getting like beat up, and women and children are being beat up by the Hungarian people and everything. And I thought, oh, whatever. I've always wanted to go to Budapest anyway. So I got on a train and I go there, and it's just nothing like that at all. It's not even close to being like that. And for me, that was just kind of like I did it as a lark, as a one-off. I didn't want to be a reporter or whatever when I was a kid growing up. But it did well, and people found it interesting. And they just started, people would just be like, oh, why don't you go look at this? Why don't you go look at that? And I just did it. Kind of wrote a, I don't know that I rode the wave. More like the wave just picked me up and took me in a direction.
It is not that I had a wave anything like yours, but even analyzing this mini wave of the last 6 weeks, it is, I'm kind of looking at it as like, okay, how do I even process it right now? But I don't even know if I'll be able to process it a year from now. But so, relating to that in that regard. So that you pick up some steam there, you gain somewhat of a following, you have a following that is legitimate, that is demonstrable. Then, you're still writing, you're still mostly in tune with your prior life, even though I think you moved back to the United States. Then you get to 2015 and you start talking about Trump. And you correct.
Right. So I'm still in Paris because
okay.
The only reason I bring this up is because if I were ever writing a book, this is like a very kind of douchebag book thing, right? So
sure.
Growing up, I always, how you read books and they'll say, the prologue or whatever, and it'll be like from Paris or from San Francisco or somewhere. And I was, so that'd be kind of cool to like write a book in Paris, maybe one day that'll happen, right? So like finally I'm living the dream. And I just happened to be on Twitter, and so what happens? I'm in Paris, and there's the Trump effect is everywhere. You walk down the street, the entire newsstands. I don't know if you've seen those kiosks. The kiosk is all Der Spiegel and Le Monde and everything with Trump's head everywhere. You couldn't get away from them. And so I just tweeted out like, "Oh yeah, Trump will probably win the nomination." This is when Trump had a ceiling of 3%. No, he won't. He's got no shot. Can't be done. I was like, no, he will. And then I was very, like I said, I didn't care about politics, but I just know that.
Real quick, one, did you believe it at the time? And two, if you did believe it, what informed that?
Yeah, sure. Of course I believed it. And what informed it was it's just, okay, so let's just step back analytically. It was never credible that he would only have 3%. How? Because 20% of the people are going to like Kim Jong-un. If you have 100%, that's just math. If you have 100% saturation, everybody's talking about you. Everybody knows who you are. Ted Bundy has groupies, right? So it's just not like if you're saying 3%, you're just to me you're not a person that I can take seriously because
sure.
That's not how human psychology works. It's not how mass psychology works. So I was just like, well, he's certainly not going to get 3%. That's not even a credible thing. And then I said, if you look at the other people against them, the only other person who would have a shot would be Ted Cruz, just because Ted Cruz is so intelligent and scheming, manipulative, and, he's a genius guy. People forget that.
Yeah.
And I go, it'll probably be, Trump, but Ted Cruz might find some kind of way to weasel it out of him. Mm-hmm. And people attack me, you idiot. You don't know shit about politics. Stick to working out. Because at the time, I was like a big buff guy and would just go to the gym and post like gym selfies and stuff. And they're just like, yeah, stick to taking steroids and everything else. And I just got sucked into this internet argument kind of stuff where I was just like, no, you people are just so wrong. And I can't even believe how wrong you are. So then I started writing about it. And then page views are just like, because nobody at the time could explain what I was explaining. There was, other than me and Scott Adams, you couldn't go find a website where they would say, well, no, here's what he's doing. Here's how you're playing into his hands. All these things that you think are going to hurt him actually aren't going to hurt him. here's the way mass psychology works, is if 100% of people know who you are, you got at least a floor of 20%, right? And I'm reading the comments, and people always mess with me because I mess with my hair. But that's
John,
kind of like,
if you've seen the comments on mine are like just a bunch of people trying to test some of their troll tactics.
mm-hmm.
They're great. They don't worry. I have enough of group chat side with them, telling them how big idiots they are. But don't worry about them.
No, I enjoy it though. It's actually part of the showmanship. So, and we talk about this in Hoaxed, where so you could read my website and be like, oh wow, this actually makes sense. But I grew up on 80s era pro wrestling. Ric Flair, these are my role models, right? Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, the Iron Sheik, right? Yeah. Kamala and all these just wild guys. The New World Order, Jesse, the Junkyard Dog, Jesse Ventura, right? These are all my heroes growing up. The $1 Million Man.
Totally.
So not only could I communicate my points of view, articulate them well, but I did it just like, oh yeah, my hair looks so good today. Went to the gym, man. How can you be this hot and this so smart? Is this even possible? And that just enraged people even more. So then you're like, I hate this guy. This guy's a douchebag. And so if you liked Trump, you were like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Somebody else is really talking about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if you're like the internet and you just like love to hate people, I was so easy to love to hate because I just played it up. I would go out in the sun and like open up my shirt and everything, just real douchebag, level stuff. And then that kept drawing in more and more and more people as we were going along, and it just kept snowballing from there.
Yeah, totally. And that was unique, and it's a little difficult for me because I only saw it all in retrospect. I went back, I discovered you and Scott Adams. Well, no, I saw Scott Adams from that far distant place that I was observing the 2016 election with. And I'm like, who's this fucking douche with this nicknames for Hillary and this and that and whatnot? It didn't make sense to me. And then election night happens, and I'm like, then I start reading his blog, not just the tweets. And I'm like, oh my God, he called it perfectly. It's insane, right? And understanding that. So you guys at the time are going through this process, and because at the time in the framing, which is a topic we're going to discuss a lot tonight, anyone who could be viewed as a Trump fan at that point was, through that frame, you were susceptible to smears and smear tactics and having adjectives and I don't know if they're superlatives, tossed at you, and those stuck simply because you one thing, regardless of supported, like I love Donald Trump, but hey, I think he's going to win, and I don't think he's the worst guy. And that's what happened to you.
Yeah, it's like open season. If you're a Trump supporter, that's something I was naive going into it because I was somebody who I never was like, when I grew up, I want to be a news anchor and play the game or whatever. It's never my aspirations. So what happens when you're a Trump supporter, perceived as a Trump supporter, oh my God, open season on you. You said this. I was like, yeah, it's a joke. I'm satirizing your dumbass. Well, you really mean it? Like the OK sign, that we used to do became a symbol of white supremacy. No, this is a real shit. So, I'll tell you a real story.
Uh-huh.
I go to the White House, and I'm with a good friend of mine, and we're doing the White House press briefing, and then I throw an OK sign at the White House podium. The #1 story on Yahoo, headline, man throws white power symbol in White House. #1 story on Yahoo News, got so viral that my wife's uncle emails her mom and says, did you know that like your daughter's married to a white supremacist?
Unbelievable. And
so Shauna's mom, because she's just like, what are you talking about? Like, I know who he is. This is like the dumbest thing in the world that I could ever imagine. Like, and this is a very smart guy, educated guy. So he sees the one headline and then email, then sends that email or whatever. That's what they do. They, so my friend Cassandra, who was with me, she actually sued the reporter, and the judge just kind of said, well, it's an opinion. White supremacist doesn't really mean anything. It's too vague of a term. And boy, it's easy to put that in a judicial opinion, but when you get called that, it certainly doesn't feel that way in your real life. Yeah. But that's what they do if you're seen as a Trump supporter. Like the OK sign, which has been around forever, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Obama, you name it, everybody's done it. They just make it up, call you these names, call you these slurs, and then that ends up in your Wikipedia entry, and then people who've never heard you go to your wiki, they're like, oh, I didn't, this is a very scary, dangerous person, blah, blah, blah. And so that's just the reality. If you're a Trump supporter, that's what's going to happen, dude. And other people get the kind of message, and that's why people were afraid to kind of support Trump, because your life is just going to be hell. And, you know, like me, even like my life was great. I didn't need to ride the Trump train any kind of notoriety. My life was perfect, actually. And if I'd have known then what I know now, you know, I might have just been like, forget this. I don't need this drama.
Fuck. Guys, give it just a second. Come on. I think we got you back. Okay, there we go.
Okay, cool.
Perfect. Okay, so, all right. And so, okay, now this kind of segues into periods and you where, because of your political views, and not even necessarily your political views, because they weren't, you did not necessarily align that powerfully. You were just an outspoken guy who happened to be on this side. What the way that you put it is that, put yourself in these shoes. Imagine that someone who's not you, the media, powerful people who have a voice and a platform, now get to write your history. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who get to determine, you know, remember a lot of people went through this exercise in elementary school or high school. A teacher would say, go and write your obituary. And you get to describe, in retrospect, what your life was like and what you did. So now imagine that somebody else gets to write that, stick it on the internet, and it becomes the #1 thing that people get to see when they search for you, and that thus almost becomes your history. And what's your experience? What's that experience for you?
Yeah, so for me, it's different, I think, than a lot of other people's. It bothers Shauna a lot more than it bothers me. And the reason for that is to be in public life, you just have to get rid of, or you just have to get over people believing things about you that are a lie. Because all my friends who are famous, like real famous, like way more famous than I am, people just believe things that are just like absurd. You know, this place last night, completely just absurd things all the time. So you have to get used to it. But you run into problems like if I rent a venue and then somebody emails the venue, oh, he's this bad person, and they show you like the Wikipedia entry. All you know as the venue owner is, all right, I don't want to deal with drama. You don't even have to know that it's true. You're just like, whatever this thing is a red flag, and this is going to be drama, and I don't want to hear. Yeah, like, so Alex J says, read Jared Kushner's Wikipedia page. Exactly. Jared Kushner is a pretty milquetoast guy.
Yeah, he's like a boring, like, he's a very vanilla, boring guy.
Yeah, he's just an Orthodox Jew. Ivanka converts to Orthodox Judaism. They keep Shabbat, all this stuff. But he's an anti-Semite, and Trump's apparently an anti-Semite, even though, you know, that surely would have been an issue in New York in real estate deals coming on and everything else. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it doesn't matter. It isn't even like me. This is what they do to everyone. Yeah. They do it to Kushner, Stephen Miller. Like the SPLC did some huge thing trying to tie him to certain groups because he emailed somebody. And they're like, oh, well, you know, he emailed somebody, and therefore that's what they do it. So what happens is if all people do is see that bad Wikipedia entry or that SPLC thing or whatever, then you're cooked, dude. You're like, there's no exit. Yeah. That's what, there's no going back into the real world for me ever.
And so what you discussed with me is like, you know, and it's ironic that, as you say, you were not growing up looking to be a journalist. You were not asking for this. Me, myself, you know, I always had this in the back of the very cliched. I saw All the President's Men, and oh my God, how much would you love to do that and be in the thick of things, in the fray of, you know, of discovering the most important information, stories in the world. So so you got dragged into this, but once they go after you, what are you going to do? You're going to fight back. You can't not fight back. What the hell are you supposed to do?
Right, and that's why I've survived, whereas a lot of people already fall off. So for me, they picked a bad enemy, I guess, in me, because my first book before politics was about mindset. Literally everything is about how to handle adversity, how do you handle it when like life is rigged. I grew up really poor as a kid growing up, parents on food stamps, like just all kinds of shit happened to me. So I was like bioengineered, I think, to fight the media by some kind of, laboratory. Okay, well, pick a guy who grew up shitty, just had a rough life anyway, grew up bullied so he doesn't like bullied, beats the hell out of everybody who ever tries to, attack him. And he wrote a whole book on how to overcome adversity and how to reframe challenges and problems as opportunities. Like this is who they're going to pick on. And so for me, it's just like you have days that are like, this is just so dumb.
Yeah.
Why am I even doing this? But the problem is that, and this is where the media, they make their own problems. There's no like quitting the game for me, right? I couldn't just be like, you know what? I've seen the error of my ways. I'm just going to go back into a normal life and live a normal life. Never going to happen.
Not happening.
You have to. So you have to lean in. You have to go twice as hard as they go. You have to be relentless every day. I mean, maybe I think the longest I haven't been online was when I did ayahuasca. So that was like 32 hours or something. People were texting me, "Are you okay? Are you alive?" So it's just relentless for, every day, 5-6 years. And that's what you have to do. You just have to be like a one-man wrecking machine.
Man, I mean, this isn't like Matt's case study on, getting dragged into this as well. But I mean, you really do. You get sucked into this world. You really do get sucked into the matrix, because the DMs come, the information comes, and it feels like every moment that there's something that you have to address, something that you have to attack. And if you don't want to get anything wrong, right? Because your credibility is at stake, and you're positioning yourself as someone who is being more thoughtful, more true, more real than the people who are in this system who have all this infrastructure supporting them. So if you're independent, it's even harder, and that's something that I'm sure you've experienced, and now you've been 4 or 5 years into this. So I mean, I don't know how has it been in terms of, have you kept up the energy?
Yeah, that's again, it goes back to there's like I've always been fit. You have to be physically fit. You have to know how to deal. Like self-care is a term. Mm-hmm. I'm always like, sometimes if I'm feeling like a little down, I know how to diagnose that shit. In a second, I'm like, well, are you doing your Wim Hof? Are you doing your cold showers? Are you doing your ice baths? And then I'm just like, oh no, I'm not. So that's the real problem. So for me, I have such a deep background in whatever you want to call it, self-care, health, wellness is always some kind of new cliche, that I just know, like, oh yeah, like I'm feeling kind of down. But for most people, they're like, I'm feeling down, I don't know what to do. And for me, I'm just like, yeah, I'm feeling down, but like I haven't been putting the work in. I haven't been doing these other kind of things. So once you balance that out, then it's just a system of like energy management and being intelligent on how you handle stress and how you deal with stress. It has aged me though, like prematurely. I used to look young for my age, and now I look my age. So I aged about 2 to 2.5 years, and that, like you see those pictures of the president where Obama 4 years later. That's definitely like me at my wedding 4 years ago. Me today, you're like, oh my God, that guy must have gone through a nuclear war.
I see it, man. I see it, because all your responsibilities and the things that you want to engage in stay increase exponentially, but the amount of time in the day, it doesn't increase. You still got 24 hours in a day. Your biochemistry, your internal systems, they don't change. Okay, so in terms of fights and things that may or may not age a person, one issue that and story that you were way more involved in than most people seem to realize is Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. 2018, 2019, in kind of this fallow period, while Epstein, everyone kind of knew he was involved in some weird stuff. There would be a story here, a story there, the Daily Bistro story, like, hey, is this the guy who could take down Trump and the Clintons and everybody? But most people had forgotten about Jeffrey Epstein. I noticed that you kept on bringing him up. You would mention that, hey, look at the story that no one's looking at. Look at the story that everyone's forgotten about. I'm filing, I wasn't sure where you were going with it. I'm filing this brief. I'm trying to unlock these records, et cetera, et cetera. Then kind of late 2019 happens, and the Epstein story pops back into the public consciousness hard. Okay. And then I look at it, and when he gets arrested again, it seems to be associated with this Miami Herald reporter. And not that she didn't do anything, but I'm like, wait a second. Why is the Miami Herald reporter getting all the credit and all the attention for reviving the story, and no one mentions Mike, who's been one of the people filing lawsuits to unseal records for a year on this? So if you could give us, hey, Epstein, everyone wants to hear Epstein. Where you gained interest in the story, what your activities were in filing lawsuits to unseal records, and how that played into this story popping back up into the public consciousness.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You don't bring it up. People who try to add my work in the Epstein case to Wikipedia, it gets deleted.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, even though there's been multiple, they just delete it. So then if you read my Wikipedia, you don't even see the stuff you do. And that's kind of how they play it. Is fake news isn't just what they tell you, it's what they don't tell you. So they really tried to write me out a story. Right.
Yes.
And they tried to write me out a story. So what happened was about 2017, I got tipped off that there was this like loophole we could do to open up the records. And here's what I mean by loophole. The Jeffrey Epstein files were completely, the criminal ones completely sealed off, nothing you could do about it. But there was a civil lawsuit involving a defamation claim against Jeffrey Epstein's madam, Ghislaine Maxwell. So there was a loophole that we could do to try to get those records unsealed. We filed a brief, a motion to intervene, and we lost. And then we appealed before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And then, to my surprise, there's a group called the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. They filed a brief saying, "Oh, actually, Cernovich is completely right. You should, you should unseal him." So we're like, okay, this is looking pretty good. And then the Miami Herald filed their own motion. The trial court denied their motion. And then they appealed. So then our appeals were kind of joined in holy matrimony and together. So now I'm in a lawsuit with Miami Herald as allies, not adversaries.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they consolidate the appeals because they're like, well, the Miami Herald wanted it, Cernovich wants it. There were two separate tracks, but you consolidate them for judicial economy and for efficiency. Meanwhile, the media doesn't care about Epstein, but Trump appoints Alexander Acosta as labor secretary. So now we have a get Trump, the orange man is bad angle. So Alexander Acosta, who was the labor secretary, was the prosecutor who oversaw the Jeffrey Epstein plea deal. The plea deal was a complete joke. So now the media, this is just a shorter way of saying, the media never cared about Epstein. They cared that Acosta was a labor secretary. So now you can say, can you believe Trump appointed the prosecutor who let Epstein off the hook as labor secretary? Blah, blah, blah. Get Trump, orange man bad, blah, blah, blah. But that really blew the story up. And I think you're right. That was like 2019. And, I'm like, okay, hi, hey, I'm here. No, they completely ignored me. But then the case goes to the Second Circuit in March. They hear the argument, and the arguments just go, if you're a lawyer, you couldn't go better. You just okay, we won. We're going to win. So then the Miami Herald and Julie Brown wrote their articles about the oral argument, the records, and they did give me credit. No one else did. But Julie Brown did. So meanwhile, everybody else is writing about the case, and then they're pretending like they don't know that I'm in the case. Right? They write you completely out of the story. And then we find out on a Friday that we're going to get the records on a Monday. That's when Epstein's suddenly arrested. Coincidentally, he's arrested. Yeah, that was just a joke. Yeah. So he's suddenly arrested, but there's no perp walk. Like, we got pictures of Roger Stone, a 65-year-old man, guys with AR-15s, but we don't have any pictures of Jeffrey Epstein on the tarmac flying in on his private jet getting arrested. No perp walk pictures. This is why the Epstein thing people like me will never get over. And I mean that in a good way, not in a scorched X way. I will never get over that there's no perp walk. Never. We got a perp walk in Roger Stone, which was just the bullshit. He lied allegedly or whatever. Just bullshit. Who cares? And like Epstein's a pedophile, creep, sex trafficker. No, there's no perp walk. There's no pictures. There's no nothing. And
yeah.
They
Yeah.
never got that. They just arrested him all politely. He lands in, in his private jet coming back from Paris. And then they take him into custody, and that's that.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so what kept your interest? There are a lot of these types of issues, right, that are controversial. Could, if someone dug, if it popped up, really spiral. What kept your interest in the story during those fallow periods where it was really just you and the, give the credit to Miami Herald. They did a good job too. What kept your interest there?
Well, I'm just kind of Aspergery on some things, so I get obsessed on anything, and I just don't kind of let go. So that just happened to be one of my obsessions. So that's the beauty of it, is most people in media, you have to churn out 3, 4, 5 stories a week. If you're at a click farm like the Daily Beast, we're talking multiple garbage a day. Me, I can just think about a case for a month and not write about it. I can just be like, well, what's going on in here, write up little notes. I don't have to do anything. And so because of that, and because of my nature just to be a little bit obsessive in a way that I've channeled to in a healthy way, I just was like, I'm never, I'm not going to let go of this. And that kept me interested, because I knew there was always, and I'm still interested in it, because like, we're not even at the tip of the iceberg, right?
Explain.
Like, we don't even know where Ghislaine Maxwell is. Like,
where the fuck is Ghislaine Maxwell?
Right?
Insane. Everyone's just like, oh, where is she? We didn't find her this week. We'll forget about her for next week.
Yeah. There's not every reporter. TMZ's not chasing her down. It really is bizarre. This is, Eric Weinstein had, I think, an interesting term, which is anti-interesting, he calls it, which is Ghislaine Maxwell is the most anti-interesting person in the world. And I thought, yeah, you're like, this is who everyone should want to be talking about. Every reporter should be doing updates. Where is Ghislaine Maxwell? Where is she? And nobody cares. Nobody's interested at all. It's like, you can't be interested.
Yeah, and what they choose to go after and what they don't, they choose not to go after. And is there a rhyme or reason? Is there an agenda? Is there laziness? It's just it's craziness. And the fact that and this is something, Weinstein, how fucking great is Weinstein? He's one of the best out. Right. If you're looking for people who, that's one of their tactics. If we're to look at what the media's tactics are, and something that you and I have discussed, the architecture of information, which becomes the architecture of misinformation, because that's what they do. So one thing would be which stories they choose to go after and which stories they don't. One thing, if I'm in my kind of amateur, media sleuth mindset, trying to think of what are the tactics that the media uses to mislead, and what's creating this misinformation. One that I believe is there's too much shelf space. There are too many goddamn stories every day. Okay. If there's a newspaper, back in the day when there's a print newspaper, you had limited space. You had to pick and choose which stories you wanted to write each day. And because you had limitations, that created an incentive towards quality. Now in the digital age, you have no incentive towards quality. They pump it out, pump it out, pump it out, pump it out. Click, 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 click. And so there's all this volume. And listen, supply and demand, just like anything else, supply goes up, quality goes down. And that's, I think, something else that you see particularly, and you've noted people like the Daily Beast and how that's impacted the way that they operate.
Yeah, they call it clickonomics, which is you can do. So there's multiple sides to clickonomics. One is that, and I know this too. Like, that's why I don't chase the dragon. But when I really want to goose traffic to my website, I'm just like, oh, General Flynn got let go. General Flynn let go. You're going to get a lot of views in it. It's
know how to do, yeah.
And I'm not adding anything to the conversation, right? That's just my take on an issue, but I'm not doing the reporting. I'm not getting the scoop. I'm not getting the early information before no one else knows. So I don't do a lot of that. But when you do it, your stats go stratospheric. So what these click farms do is, this is why Gawker got, sued into oblivion. They just take people like you. Oh yeah, Matt Belinsky, he works in PR. In 2011, he tweeted this thing. And now you're like a thing. And your career is more or less destroyed. and they're going to get 50,000, 100,000 views, and you're just one of like 10 people whose lives they ruined. You're just turned to them, right? You're just one guy.
Ruining lives is part of their fucking business model.
Yeah, and you're just one guy. They get their 50,000, 100,000 views, maybe if it really goes wild. And then they do that to 5 other people that day and wake up the next day. And that's what they do. That's why there's always so much writing about like tweets and just, you're like, why do we care, right? Who cares about any of this? But like me, and I talked about this a little bit in Hoaxed, but not as much, is I sort of weaponized what they were doing to me. So they're like, well, we're going to write about your tweet, Cernovich. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write about yours. They hate me. I've gotten so many of them fired, so many people in trouble over. And then I took it to another level where I started sending their tweets to HR departments because then you know they're going to get looked at. So they hate me. But I'm like, this is what you all just did to me. You know?
Yeah.
This is what you did to me. They have a huge problem, though, when I do the same methodology on them.
The best is, this is the best. First of all, I mean, before I got a little more into the closure of the public sphere, I mean, one of my badges of honor was being blocked by like 12 Gawker fucking idiots on Twitter. Fuck all of them. Anyways, the best thing is this. Once Gawker got shredded by Hulk Hogan and Peter Thiel, who were fucking American heroes for doing so, everyone's like, oh my God, Peter Thiel used his money to sue Gawker into oblivion. Now, if you want to be smart and informed and understand what actually happened, you'll go read Ryan Holiday's book, Conspiracy, that broke this down in a level of detail that is otherworldly, okay? And what actually happened is that's what Gawker was trying to do to Hulk Hogan. That was their strategy. Their strategy was, they thought he was poor. They're like, oh man, Hulk Hogan, he's been on tough times. He's down. We're going to kick him when he's down. Okay? They were the big company with the deep pockets. They were going to use their money to put all the litigation pressure on Hulk Hogan. All Peter Thiel did was allow Hulk Hogan to go toe to toe with him. And the fucking media narrative becomes this rich guy funded this guy and sued this company into oblivion. And it's completely upside down.
Yeah, you can't. That's why people tell me I'm an attorney, and people are like, "Why don't you see them for what you say?" And I was like, "Why don't I spend, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds, if not thousands of hours of my own time, probably lose because of the way the court system works? Gee, I don't know. Why, like I made Hoaxed on $290,000, so I could spend $290,000 on another lawsuit, or I could make another film and do a ton of other things, and these companies know that." And they're very clever. They have lawyers review things. So what they'll do to me now is they won't say white supremacist because I'm just like, I will sue you for that. They'll go connected, ties to, has been associated with, is on the periphery of, which everyone is. Everyone's on the periphery to a murder. Everybody you know knows a pedophile. Like literally everyone in here probably has an uncle who knew someone, the whole thing, but that's how they played. Oh yeah, he's on the periphery of Limbaugh's in here. Good to see you, Steve, the composer for this year. That's what they do to avoid this lawsuit. So if you sue them, you're just like, well, they go, well, they didn't call you a white supremacist. They just said you're associated with them. And here's a picture of you in 2015 with the guy that you didn't even know, but he's in the picture with you. Tough shit, checkmate, right? And that's why Gawker was able to get away with it. So with Hulk Hogan, he had somebody with the bankroll to take them through the whole process. And Peter Thiel had found a bunch of other defendants and helped them, get through the process too, because it costs a ton of money and your odds of success are very low. Even Peter Thiel didn't sue them on his own behalf. He had to find Shellman.
He had to find a legitimate claim. Right. That's what Peter Thiel didn't just throw $1 billion of his fortune at Gawker. He had to find a legitimate claim where they violated someone's rights, and then all he did was allow him to the victim to go toe to toe and actually win the case on the merits. And real quick, shout out to my buddy. I don't know if he's watching right now. Ryan Stonerock. He's an attorney. He's partners with Charles Harder, who's the lawyer on that case. Great work that they're doing, and if anyone wants to If anyone wants to check out this story, go read Ryan Holiday's Conspiracy. I think it's a book that, along with how Hoaxed in a visual and film, motion picture level, is that insight into what we're dealing with right now.
I'm listening.
Conspiracy is the same. Okay, so some other tactics, other things. You mentioned one tactic. It's kind of the parenthetical. What did we mention? If you could explain that a little bit.
Sure. So I call it the parenthetical of death, which is, you know, a person's name and then the information about them between whatever they did. So you would say, you know, let's say Mike Cernovich drank a glass of wine. That's I forget the terms from high school English, but there's a subject, object, and whatever. So the parenthetical is Mike Cernovich, comma, is drinking wine yet again for the 30th night in a row, comma. And he said the following, but that little parenthetical is like, yeah, I drink, like I'm not drinking bottles of wine. I'm not like taking shots. But if they want to make you look like an alcoholic, like that's what they'll do. Mike Cernovich, comma, who's drinking wine again on a live stream, said the following. Because now if you're reading that, you think the guy's drunk. You're like, oh shit, he must have had a meltdown. Like what? But it's just completely irrelevant that I was doing it. And that's how they shade whatever they're about to say. So with me, they'll go, the funniest one was on Huffington Post. And it was Mike Cernovich, comma, a men's rights advocate and rape apologist who promulgated the Pizzagate conspiracy theorist and has a history of spreading fake news, comma. And you're just like, okay, that one almost helps you because it's so absurd. You're just nobody's gonna read that and be like, oh, what now? Like, what do you? Because if you're a criminal, they would just be like, Mike Cernovich, comma, a serial killer, comma, said the following, like he gets the job done. Like you really have to stash all that stuff in there if I'm so evil or bad. And that's what they do. That's the parenthetical, is how they set people up. And then the flip side is the way they set people on the left is they'll be like Media Matters, comma, a nonprofit that analyzes news. And you're just like, well, no, it's actually a far left-wing smear operation that doesn't ever analyze liberal media. It only tries to get conservatives fired. But if you read that, you're like, oh, Media Matters, nonprofit. It sounds very, very cool, very clean. Everything's great. That's how they flip it. But then if they talk about me, Mike Cernovich, comma, far right, there's so many of them. But and then here's the beautiful quirk of it. So when I criticize Trump, I go from far right-wing agitator to conservative commentator. I can actually show because when you're then they're like, hey, it's like the devil, the poison or the forbidden fruit. They're like, hey, you know, we can rehab your image here a little bit if you do our bidding. And you can see that. I actually showed that to Shauna because when Trump did this thing with Syria, I was like,
you were on top of that one, like
yeah. So then you read the articles, but because people turned on Trump, I'm the good guy now, and Trump is the bad guy. So there's all these different ways that they shade coverage. So it's everywhere you look. You can't just get straight news. Like, who is this guy, right? Like, even my Wikipedia, social media personality. So, like, first of all, what does that even mean? Second of all, we all know what a vlogger is. I'm not a vlogger. I'm not a social media personality. I use social media for other things. It doesn't say I'm a lawyer. Like, I'm a lawyer. I'm a licensed attorney. That's not in my bio. I was in the military. That's not in there. So they deliberately keep, and this is, the Wikipedia is just a microcosm of all the news. They keep out anything that might add to your cachet, or even if it's honest.
Was one of the few people to continue keeping the Jeffrey Epstein story alive.
Exactly,
yeah, it's a little odd how they seem to hide that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Or here's another example. So I recently sued to get some records in the Roger Stone jury case.
Wow.
And a couple articles came up from left-wing sites saying, oh, Cernovich is harassing people trying to get these records. Well, the New York Times filed a brief, an amicus curiae brief, with the Freedom of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, saying I should get them and that they want them too. But that gets left out. So it isn't Mike Cernovich, comma, is trying to open up court records like he did in the Jeffrey Epstein case. What they do is, yeah, people always say you can update your Wikipedia. Go edit my Wikipedia and tell me how long those are. I hear this from everybody. You can go try it. Go try right or after this interview is over. Go try my Wikipedia. First of all, there's a lock on the upper right-hand corner, so you can't even edit it unless you're like a special little editor. And then if you edit anything, they'll revert it. So for me, with the Wikipedia stuff, it's always like, there's a term where I believe I agree with called mansplaining. Like men really are like, because they do it to men. Oh, yeah. You said this. So Wikipedia is like Wikipedia explained to me. It really triggered me. Like, it never occurred to me, a guy who's made a top-selling documentary, Broken Big, it never occurred to me to just go on Wikipedia and edit things. I've written books. Never thought about that, though, right? You just got to go there. Anybody can edit it. So that's what they do. They lock it up. You can't do anything. And then even if you are one of those special editors, because a few people who are editors, they have higher level permissions. They've tried to change it, reverted, end of story. And then there was even on the talk page, it said, you have to write Wikipedia in a neutral fashion. And a neutral fashion means you have to realize that many people believe that he's genocidal. And so that's what neutral point of view means. Neutral point of view doesn't mean true. Neutral means if people who write on Wikipedia think that I'm an evil person, you have to write things for their point of view, because their point of view has to. It just can't be done. It's just the way it is. So you get used to it.
Yeah. No, and this is something that I think another thing, just like the issue with Gawker and Hulk Hogan and them not, it was just this poor media company. No, it was a rich media company that was trying to fucking just suspend someone into oblivion, and someone just if there's smoke, there's fire. There's no way that the media would lie that viciously, that ruthlessly, and that directly about a person. Yes, they will. Yes, they will.
Yeah.
Yep.
They destroy people's lives. Just in a way that's, because with me, when they cry about me, I always say, you know what? At least I'm banging with my own people, my own weight. I'm going other journalists. I'm going at, Hollywood directors. I'm going at the highest levels. You don't see me find some random nobody and be like, oh, I found out you're cheating on your wife. And you're like they did to that that Geithner guy. It's like, oh, he was seeing male escorts. So a male escort was trying to blackmail him. He didn't have the money to pay the blackmail, so then the male escort went to Gawker. And now Gawker's putting this guy's business on the site, which is that he's in the closet and having sex with male escorts, which is problematic because maybe they had an open thing. Point is, you don't even know. Point is, I would never do that to someone. I would never be like, hell yeah, you got extorted by an escort, and now people
we're gonna get we're gonna get the clicks. We're gonna get the clicks.
That's what they do to people. Yeah, they're horrible. That's just a horrible, horrible, horrible people. And they did it to him. They did it to everybody, and that was their downfall. But yeah, the history of that now is, oh, poor Gawker, great journalistic outlet, taken down by greedy, evil billionaire, and blah. Meanwhile, like Jeff Bezos runs the Washington Post and uses that to like smear people who go against him. So it's not even any principle. Yes.
Okay. So let's go to that. People need to realize who. Okay. All right. Here's another observation of mine, macro observation on this level. You've got these news. Okay. We are now essentially 18, 19 years into digital being dominant. The first, mostly through the 2000s, it was still kind of a transition phase, but we're probably about 10 to 12 years into true digital domination. People still view CNN or the New York Times or the Washington Post like, based on the reputation they built a long time ago, that is no longer warranted. And they don't think about who owns these companies. They don't realize that they have incentives, that their behavior and their standards and their ethics are governed by who owns them and what their boss is telling them. Just for instance, right? And in terms of these companies criticizing China, right? You got to understand the reason that you do not hear much China criticism for corporate media is every media organization, whether you're CNN, Fox, NBC, whatever. You're a part of a bigger multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation that does a bunch of business in China. If you're a news organization, you are owned by a company that also has a movie studio that wants to go fucking wants to go show movies in China. And they know if they go talk too much shit about China on the newscast, they're going to hear it from the Chinese government about their movies being streamed, being broadcast in China. So you have all this, they have all these incentives not to bring this up. I'm going to give a real quick shout out to one company, Viacom, who allowed one of their more prominent content creators, Matt Stone and Trey Parker of South Park, to actually do an episode on this. Okay? I got to give it up to fucking Viacom. I could not believe they let South Park go after China and go after this issue as strongly as they did. So this is just one instance of, if you're thinking about why news organizations do give the stories they give, or hold back the stories they hold back, this is one of the reasons. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a rant. Mike, would love your thoughts.
No, it's true. One of the jokes I tell when I give events is I go, you know, I don't even care anymore. I'm just going to tell you the truth. I don't care what happens to me. People are like, oh, wow. I'm going to tell you who really controls Hollywood. Uh-oh, who's that? China. Like, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, but everybody's expecting, you know, a certain other, you know, answer to that. And it's like, no, China controls it. All these conspiracy theories about who controls Hollywood is it's China. They had to take the Taiwanese flag off of the Top Gun jacket, just little shit like that. NBC Universal, they have a huge theme park going up in Beijing. You can't, so you now see all this pro NBC stuff, and it's just all about following the money.
Totally.
The money, the Chinese money. That's why you can't criticize them. That's why our own institutions are saying, well, China has no coronavirus cases. Like, well, they said so. It must be true. Okay, like, sure thing. And you're watching this, and it's kind of frustrating to watch American media outlets do Chi-Com propaganda. But that's where we are. And that's another, again, it's just another example of, like, how the narrative gets shaped. You can't criticize China if you're at NBC News because that can impact an NBC Universal deal, and you don't want to do that, and then that becomes part of the culture. And then Washington Post can't criticize China because Bezos and Amazon have all this business with China, and it's like that way. CNN, they would get kicked out of China. Most people don't know CNN's revenue comes from international.
Yes,
they get a ton of international revenue. They would lose out on that. They would lose out on, so they don't want to do that. So when you follow the money, that's why we're being told that you can't call it Corona China virus because that's racist, even though China's a country. And you can't criticize China, and you have to accept their propaganda numbers at face value. So it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere you look, at every kind of level, we're being manipulated. And, you know, in a way, anytime somebody does media, they're manipulating it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's usually like unconscious. So you have your in group and you want your in group to look good. And if somebody in your in group gets in trouble, you don't feel that kind of fire in your belly to go after whoever your in group is. Like, that's just human nature. And you're never gonna really solve for that. But these monetary biases are completely unstated. NBC News should have a blurb. NBC Universal has a theme park in Beijing, and then let the readers decide if that kind of stuff should be credible. But instead, you just don't know. You're like, oh yeah, NBC News.
Wi-Fi in the okay, there we go.
Does Disney want China upset? Well, NBC News, owned by Disney and China and Hollywood, China funding Frozen, and it's the biggest market now international. It used to be the international. You remember this? You were in the industry. International. Small percentage of overall doings. Yeah.
Sorry, Mike, we're having a little Wi-Fi trouble, just a little bit.
Okay.
I think maybe give it a second. The comments are heating up, the audience is heating up, and the conversation's heating up. We're not going to let Wi-Fi screw this up for us. Okay, sorry, Mike. If you continue, we'll just try to work through it, and we're gonna reboot in just a minute, anyways, because we're coming to the. So as you were saying on China, that people, and I'll tie it back to another point, that people don't realize who's running these networks. For instance, when about a month ago, when I started commenting on this issue and people started coming to me asking for an understanding of media, one thing I was trying to tell them, you know who fucking, do you realize who runs CNN? Jeff Zucker, Go look at Jeff Zucker's background. Jeff Zucker made his career on reality TV. He was The Apprentice. He was schlock. That's what he did. Okay. So like, if you're wondering why CNN might not be the CNN, your father's CNN from 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you've got a guy running it. Like, he's the fucking boss. A station is going to take on and assume some of the characteristics of the boss. And if the boss is someone who was trained in sensationalist content, sensationalist media, it's going to become sensationalist. And people should be aware of this. People should not, this should not be hidden from people.
I agree.
Thank you very much. Okay, sorry for the rant. You know, the Wi-Fi gave us a second for that right there. Okay, so all right, real quick. You know something? I think this is a good time. We're not fucking stopping. We got too much heat going on. But Instagram comes to the end of an hour, so we're 4 minutes away from that. Why don't we stop now and then start back up, and then we'll get into more contemporary issues in a little bit. That's you know, this was the background hour, and we'll get into an hour that's a little bit more about where we're at and where we're going in life. So everybody, I'm going to stop right now, and we're going to reboot it in just a second.
Great.
Awesome.